Welcome to this week's Future Toolbox podcast. We explore the Z to A of life skills, where each letter stands for a topic and essential tool to help you get ahead in life. Meet Jules and Mark, creators of the multi-award-winning Future Toolbox, and enjoy their straightforward approach to creating growth mindsets that help people turn their dreams into realities. Whether you're a teen in education, a parent, a teacher, or part of a community group, start creating positive habits from today.
Hello everybody and welcome to the latest Z2A podcast with myself, Mark, and Jules from the multi-award-winning Future Toolbox.
Hello everybody and welcome to this episode.
Now this is where we pick a letter in a topic and discuss how you can use our tools to improve your own personal development and life. What is this week's letter we have chosen?
We have chosen the first letter of the alphabet, which obviously is A, and we're having the topic of awareness. Now, the reason that we've chosen awareness is on the 2nd of April, it is actually World Autism Awareness Day. Now, whereas we are not total experts in autism, we are hugely aware that we live in a inherently neurodiverse world now. Although neurodiversity is not always easily apparent or particularly understood, it does get categorised, and many people have diagnoses such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia or dyspraxia, or sometimes, a combination of all of these, and some people don't. And this is what makes us all completely individual. We are all just individuals and beautiful human individuals.
That's a lovely way of describing it, isn't it? What I've found over the years, and you just listed off a range of neurodiverse conditions which affect a lot of teenagers in schools, and obviously adults as well, because they don't go away.
No.
One more to add on there is brain injury, and having suffered a brain injury myself, I notice a lot of the traits and a lot of the challenges that people face when they are diagnosed with any of these conditions. But one thing we've noticed over the years, certainly as this has become more aware and these conditions have become more spoken about, more open, is that sometimes people put themselves into boxes or feel they've been put into a box because they have this particular condition. And then that leads to maybe that person feeling even more isolated as opposed to being supported. So I think the word that we've chosen, A, for awareness, is all about really putting your empathy out there and showing your empathy to those people that are maybe struggling in certain areas. And I know from being on the receiving end of empathy myself with my brain injury and the challenges I suffer, there are good ways of doing it and there are not so good ways of doing it as well.
Yeah, I mean, neurodiversity itself refers to the fact that our brains process information in different ways. This means there are differences in how we take in the information from the world around us, and then equally different on how we put that information together in our brains. And there is that word different again, but it just means we're individual because we may be on a spectrum somewhere. So being aware of neurodiversity and neurodivergence, these words are really big for me today, is really, really important, because if you've got that knowledge or you've researched it or you've found out about it, you can then have that understanding, like you're saying, that everyone has different needs. They experience things in their own particular way and they respond to that unique experience accordingly to their world. And it's grasping that understanding and acceptance and empathy.
And I was just thinking now, when you were saying that, we've used the word different, individual and unique a few times already. And when you think about it, we're all unique. If you take away neurodiversity and put in trends or tastes, we don't all like the same food. We don't all like the same dress sense. We don't all like the same music. So everybody is individual in their own ways. But neurodiverse conditions are things that we don't choose. They're things that occur within the brain. And we can't just suddenly just flick a switch and say, do you know what, I'm going to get rid of that today, or I'm going to change that a bit. We have to live with these conditions. So the difference, I guess, is one is choice and one isn't choice. But the acceptance side of things, if I accept you like a song and I don't like it, then that's absolutely fine. We have to accept that. We could sit there and argue about it, but I don't really want to argue about it. I just accept you like that song, I don't. You like that type of food, I don't. We have to then accept that this person has this neurodiverse condition and maybe the other person doesn't. So that's where the empathy and understanding has to come in.
But that also then creates a more inclusive community, which for me, I think is the way that we should be. so that everybody is inclusive, irrespective of anything to do with neurodiversity, anything to do with whether you're male, you're female, what colour eyes you've got, what colour skin you've got, whatever your nationality is.
I wanted to take a little look at maybe some of the common traits and challenges that maybe neurodiverse people face. So we've talked a little bit about World Autism Day at the start, but the traits of autism can also link very, very closely to the traits of, say, ADHD, for instance. The traits of ADHD certainly link to what I experience as a brain injury. So a lot of these diagnoses, as I say, have similar traits. So looking at autism to start with, here are some of the challenges that maybe somebody could face. It could be difficulty with a social situation, being in a busy environment or being around people and actually having to communicate with people.
Yeah, it's almost like responding to social cues or understanding what's happening in that social surrounding. And from that, being able to get involved in conversations and possibly sharing emotions. So that can be something that is quite difficult for somebody with autism.
And that also includes maybe limited eye contact or limited body language. So as you say, sometimes the emotion is removed from that person. You could be having a conversation with somebody who's autistic and they may be looking away, looking around somewhere else. And perhaps if you don't have an understanding of autism, then you might be thinking that person's really rude to you because they're not looking you in the eye. They're not smiling when you're saying something that might be normally greeted with a smile or something along those lines.
And that's why I think some people with autism prefer to be alone, or actually because they have that difficulty of making and perhaps maintaining friendships because they feel socially awkward and don't fully understand social situations.
Now, also looking at more research we've done on autism, this one really stood out for me, which is repetitive behaviours. Now, repetitive behaviours could be movements or it could be speech and repeating the same thing over and over again. And then also recently a phrase that's been coined is stimming or self-stimulation behaviours. This could be like rocking in a chair or using hand movements or flapping. And this is a way of regulating sensory input or emotions. And then, of course, a real strong attachment to routines and rituals. So maybe it's difficult to go off track when something new comes along or something changes. Now, having a brain injury, this jumps out massively at me because sometimes I'm on track A and I have to move on to track B and I can't. I simply cannot get off of track A because I'm on that track, I'm on that course. And when somebody puts something new in the way and says you've got to change the course, I find it incredibly difficult to do that.
That's very true. I find that in our business, that when we want to introduce something new, at the beginning you think, oh yeah, this is great, that's a great idea. But the actual doing, we can't manage to do that for some reason. And it takes many attempts for us to put something new into our work for you to find that to become the norm, whereas you're quite used to doing something previously. So yeah, I totally get that. And also one of the other things that is very similar in terms of from your brain injury is sensory sensitivities.
Yeah.
This is a big one for autistic people. Often it's called sensory overload or under responsiveness, where you could be sensitive to certain sounds, lights, textures or tastes, or you may actually seek out some form of intense sensory input.
And again, also from a personal point of view, we're saying about the sensory overload. Only yesterday we was in a coffee shop enjoying a really nice coffee and of course a bit of cake, which was lovely. But when we walked in there, the noise and the sensory overload was massive for me because you've got the coffee machines that seem to be the loudest things in the world ever. If somebody can invent a quiet coffee machine, they would be a very rich person, I think. And then we went and sat down at the table and there was a family with a baby that was crying. Again, not the baby's fault, not the family's fault. Because that baby was crying, it started off another baby crying. And then a couple sat behind us and decided to have a video call with somebody on their phone. And they were having a really animated video call, which got louder and louder and louder because the noise in the room was louder. So everybody was trying to almost out loud each other. And you sat there and went, this is absolutely driving me mad. So it must be driving you mad as well. And it was really tough. But thankfully I was sitting in a corner, so there was no noise coming from behind me. Otherwise, I think that would have wiped me out. So I totally get the sensory overload that anybody can deal with if they have any diagnosis like autism or
that sensory overload. And I've seen it many times where it can lead that person to be extremely distressed and have meltdowns or even shutdowns. And I totally get it because it's just something that your brain doesn't want and cannot process.
Yeah, it can lead to very high anxiety, can't it?
And this all leads us on to looking at some of the common traits, for want of a better word, of ADHD, which are quite similar but different. It's really hard to explain, isn't it? But with the ADHD, it includes things like inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity. Oh, it's a difficult word.
It is, isn't it?
That can manifest itself as difficulty in focusing, excessive fidgeting, and acting without thinking. That's something that quite often happens. And this impacts daily life, relationships and learning. And my youngest son, we've now recognised if this was available to have this assessment when he was at school, he showed all of these.
Absolutely. And likewise here as well. I don't think I had the hyperactivity, but I certainly had ADD, because my ability to pay attention to something was very, very difficult, especially if I wasn't hugely interested in it. I just wander off into my own little world. And this would lead to me being poorly organised, forgetting things, and also understanding and following instructions, which are all traits of ADD, ADHD. If you research the common traits of it, it's daydreaming. I was a massive daydreamer. I would have passed an exam in that, because
it's a good song.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Daydreamer by the Monkeys, I think. The Monkeys?
Yeah, or David Cassidy did one, Daydreaming.
I think he did, didn't he? Yeah.
Yes.
Look at that. You see, we've just gone completely off track and got distracted. Now I'm trying to think of the words of that song and what were we talking about before?
Now I'm just remembering the big poster of David Cassidy I used to have on my bedroom wall as a
bless
very
you.
young girl.
But joking aside, it does lead to that sort of thing where you just go completely off track. And again, having a brain injury has really accentuated these conditions for me. So I now find it even harder to concentrate. I'll be sitting, say, at the laptop working on something work-related. Next thing I'll be doing is I'll be standing there looking out the window and thinking, what was I doing again? Why did I come over here? And my whole ability to function and focus on that. So, as you say, Russell certainly would have been diagnosed with ADHD.
Absolutely.
I certainly would have been diagnosed with ADD at some point. And because of my injury, it's been really, really blown out of proportion as well. So I have absolute empathy for anybody who's had these diagnoses too.
Yeah, and another thing with ADHD is acting without thinking, making really, really quick decisions without possibly considering the consequences. So often rushing into things, and that can cause a lot of issues if you're, say, within a school or in a classroom and you suddenly think, right, that's it, I've had enough, or I don't want to do this, or I fancy doing that instead, and off you go and do it. Then you're obviously classed as the troublemaker quite often. So some of these traits of these conditions can cause lots of issues whilst you're trying to get through your education.
And one thing we talked earlier about was the acceptance and understanding and showing empathy to people who have neurodiverse challenges. And you just mentioned one there about the person getting into trouble maybe in school. Now, I remember a number of years ago, we went into a school and there was a lad sitting in the front row and he kept interrupting. Every time me or you said something, he kept interrupting. And I thought, this is incredibly rude. And it was really, really irritating me at this point. So I went to have a word with him. I said, look, could you stop interrupting? Because it is really, really rude. And he went, oh, it's okay, it's my ADHD. And at that point, I sort of stood back and thought, I don't know how to react to this, because he's almost making it as an excuse. So I got even more irritated at that point. But then what I realised was the lad actually stopped interrupting us. And then I remember you were talking and he was listening, and I thought, oh, hold on a second. That was almost like a switch got flicked for me, because I went from thinking this guy is really rude to actually there is something there. He's telling the truth. And he wasn't using an excuse, and he apologised in his own sort of roundabout way. And I think that is where we need to go with the awareness. A for awareness is we need to look at the individuality, the difference, the challenges, all of the things that we mentioned earlier, that we are all different people, and we need to accept and understand and educate ourselves on the fact that people have different challenges.
Absolutely. We said about that, then we would have a wonderful, inclusive community. However, we do hear certain phrases some of the times, particularly in the brain injury world, where people will look at you and think, well, you look fine. And I get that all the time. Well, he looks okay. Mark's fine. He did this. He managed to run a very good race the other day. Oh, he played paddle this morning. There's nothing wrong with him. And honestly, it's so frustrating, because these things like ADHD, autism, and all the other conditions that are out there, they're not physical ones. You cannot see them. So therefore, people just assume there's nothing wrong with you. And that's really, really hard to live with. So what other things have you heard people say that you think, oh no?
I think I get the one around fatigue a lot, is because a lot of friends and people that I associate with and meet, I explain to them about fatigue and the fact that I might need to sleep in the afternoons. And some people either say, it must be your age, that's why you're getting tired. Or the other one is, you're really lucky that you can sleep in the afternoon. I'd love to do that. I guess I'm in a good position where I can rest in the afternoon, but I would absolutely give anything not to be able to have to rest in the afternoon, because it's not a choice thing.
It's not a choice. And actually, we were only having this conversation the other day when we were looking at some notes that we'd taken when we were on the course, understanding the brain injury, the fatigue and all the rest of it. And you had written down, rest is your medicine.
Yes.
And I'd forgotten that. And for now, I just think I'm just going to say that to everybody that says anything. I say, well, that's his medicine. You might take a pill, but this is what Mark's brain needs. And quite possibly the same for people with any of these conditions. They might need to just rest their brains sometimes to help it calm and recover from the activity it's trying to process.
Definitely. And what I remember was talking to a friend in the past who didn't realise in the early days that I had a brain injury. And she just said, I thought you were being rude. I thought you weren't listening to me. And that is exactly the perception that we had of that lad in that school. We thought he was being rude because he was interrupting. This lady thought I was being rude because I was looking around the room. I had no ability to function and focus on what was actually going on at that particular time. Once she understood that, she actually apologised and said, I'm really sorry.
Do you remember that session that we did? And there was also a young person in there that we very quickly realised had got Tourette's.
Yes.
And other circumstances, people wouldn't have been able to have recognised that straight away. I managed to speak to the teacher and I say, is there anything that we need to be aware of or do specifically for this person? Because it was something that we just didn't want to make him feel uncomfortable, and to allow him to join in as he could and be inclusive.
And the last one I just wanted to really touch upon is when you're showing empathy to people, and I've done this myself, you've done it to other people, we all do this, but a natural caring person wants to over-empathise. The one I hear quite a lot myself is somebody goes, yeah, I get tired too, or yeah, I forget things too, yeah, I know exactly how you feel, I suffer from fatigue. And if that person doesn't understand, it is sometimes really difficult to put yourself in their shoes. So it is just saying something along the lines of, yeah, that must be really, really difficult challenge. Is there anything I can do to help you? I receive that a lot better than somebody going, yeah, I feel tired too. But please, if you do say that to me, I don't get irritated anymore. I know that you're being nice and I accept that myself as well. But sometimes somebody else might get irritated by it. So it's just approaching it in the right possible way and thinking, yep, I get that. What can I do to help?
We hope this has helped people to think about raising their awareness, or maybe you think, oh yeah, I do that. So you already have these skills to be aware of other people and their way of processing information.
Of course. You can find lots of tools and tips on our website, which is futuretoolbox.co.uk. We're on social media. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook and TikTok. We also have a YouTube channel with lots of really useful videos on there. And you can reach out to us personally on LinkedIn, because we are
just everywhere.
And if you want to get in touch with our neurodiverse side, you can go to our specialised brain injury project, which is called brainourshine.com. And that has all the links for our resources on that. And we look forward to catching you in the next episode.
We do indeed. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us for the Z2A of Life Skills with Jules and Mark of the Future Toolbox. Don't forget to head over to their website, which is futuretoolbox.co.uk, where you can find lots of free resources, plus a host of books in the store, as well as subscribing to the membership site. Follow Future Toolbox Instagram, TikTok and Facebook at Future Toolbox, and subscribe to their YouTube channel too.